Thank you, Chair. And I just want to address an initial point, and that is that there is no attempt to silence debate on the issue of migration in this country. I have engaged in countless debates and discussions in this House, in the other House. I have engaged in countless discussions around the country with individual groups, speaking to them about proposals in their area, but also speaking about how that fits into the state's wider migration policy. Deputies, this attempt to kind of cloak yourselves in victimhood that you're being silenced, go talk to an Afghan man or a Syrian man in international protection accommodation. Ask them what government suppression of discussion looks like. No one's trying to silence you. Wouldn't mind silencing Danny's phone every now and again, but I tell you, beyond that, there is no attempt to silence anybody. I'm always willing to engage in discussion and engage in a comprehensive debate about the issues of migration in this country. But let me say, what you've presented us today, that adds nothing to that discussion. You've placed most of your focus on the issue of international protection in the system, and I think it's important that we remember the origins of that system. It was put in place to deal with the shameful legacy of Jewish refugees being turned away from country after country during the Holocaust. And Ireland closed its doors at that time too, along with other countries. And what international protection now means is fairly and humanely examining a claim for asylum, sheltering and supporting people while that claim is being assessed, and giving people the right to stay here where it is adjudicated that that right needs to be provided. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. We shouldn't shy away from it. It's fundamentally a compassionate act, whatever the challenges we face, and I believe it is a system that is worth fighting for, and I will continue to defend it. But I'll also be very honest about the challenges, and particularly in the area of accommodation. The reliance on private providers, the variable accommodation standards, the fact that we've little control over locations, those are compounding challenges that exist in relation to migration. And my officials have worked incredibly hard in very challenging circumstances to keep people as safe as best we can. However, we are working in the confines of a system that was created for a different era. We need a system where the state holds the reins of control in terms of its accommodation, its location, and its standards. And without that control, we can't put in place the supports that are needed for those who arrive. We won't have the space and the time to engage in communities where accommodation is being located, and we will be consistently relying on elements outside of our control. We've seen that this is a system that can fail. It's failing right now. So the change we need to make to this system is vital. It's a change that won't happen overnight. It's a change that it will be the job of successive governments to implement. But to ignore that challenge, to refuse to reform, or just to blame people who come here seeking international protection, that will only worsen the problem. Prior to the Christmas break, I'll be seeking government approval for a revised white paper, setting out how we can enhance the level of state-owned accommodation, as it's when we have state-owned accommodation, the state will have control. Deputies, you put a lot of focus on male international protection applicants in your motion. I want to just make 2 points on this point. And the first, I'd ask the question, and it's one in other debates we've had on migration in this House, it's one I've asked before. Is there any of us who can put our hand in our heart and say there isn't a male member of our family who hasn't gone abroad seeking work? There are unvetted male migrants in every one of our families. And we are lucky as a country that other countries let them come in and let them contribute to the system. And there's not one of us who can say that didn't happen in our own families. But the second point I'll make is that men are killed in war. I'm old enough to remember the pictures from the Bosnian War, the pictures from Srebrenica, the pictures as the UN pulled out. The Serb paramilitaries arrived. It was all smiles at the start, and then the men were separated from the women. Deputies, they're still finding those men's bodies in pits around Srebrenica today. They identify them with their dental records. They identify them with the scraps of clothes that are still stuck to their skeletons. Men are targeted in war. Men are victims of war. And yes, sometimes men flee war. And maybe some deputies think they wouldn't flee. Maybe some deputies think they'd be braver. But it's very easy to say that in the comfort of our seats in Leinster House. So I'll continue to engage in discussion about the issue of migration. I'll continue to engage with all deputies when there is proposals for accommodation in their particular area. But I do not believe that what has been presented today in any way sheds light on this issue or progresses this issue and gives any guidance in terms of how our state deals with something that is a real challenge, but it's a challenge that is faced all over the world, and it is a challenge that will be managed by this state and managed in such a way that we will continue to see the benefits of migration that we have seen to such an extent over the last number of years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.